Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And it is this episode releasing in almost mid-October, which means we're in the end game now for John Ford. Finally, only a couple more months, and joining me is one of my best friends, Haley. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting John Ford movie with me.
I'm actually really glad that I got to watch a second John Ford movie for this marathon you've been doing because, and we'll get into it, but I liked this one. I really did.
Fun, charming movie. That I could easily say this is a fun, charming movie. Because what was the last one that we did together?
The Rio Grande, which was it was just a Western and it was just like textbook. Like I don't even
Yeah,
watch Westerns and I'm like, this is a textbook Western. This is exactly what I thought I was avoiding when I never watched Westerns.
I think so.
But it
Well,
was good to see as like a point of comparison.
so what does John Ford love more than westerns? Films about
Ireland.
Ireland. And so what do we got here today? The Rising of the Moon. But we'll get to that. For those who haven't tuned into the show before, we got three segments. Like I said, October 11th, we have some new releases, coming attractions to talk about, and then we have our feature film, The Rising of the Moon, and we have a beefy collection of some recommendations to talk about. So let's get started with coming attractions. So this is indeed the weekend where we're getting the likes of Lego-fied Pharrell Williams biopic. We're getting a movie about one of the most famous late night shows of all time. And that goddamn Art the Clown is back, and it's Terrifier 3 time. It's not the one that either of us are talking about. I was definitely not the biggest fan of Terrifier 2 compared to everybody else. I did not need 2.5 hours of that. But Haley, what did you want to point out?
So, Shane and I saw the trailer for the Pharrell um
Yep.
autobiographical movie that he's
Piece by
mm,
piece.
piece by piece, which he like is narrating in the trailer and it's Legos. We were there to see Alien Romulus, so it was a bit jarring to like
Yeah. I was like, why
see.
is this trailer up beforehand?
But it was wholesome, and I actually think it
Yes.
was a nice like palate cleanser before we got into what we were there to see. Um, but yeah, I was talking to Shane earlier about this. I think that there are movies about people, and then there are Lego movies, and making a Lego movie about a beloved
Person.
person, right? Like it's an interesting move, and I'm intrigued. I don't know if I'm gonna get out there to see it, but I kind of want to know like why Pharrell did this and like what they're going to do with this medium
And
because
how much did Lego have to pay for him to make this biopic in Legos? But I'm assuming it's something that is helping him express his internal perspective on things.
that's what I'm
Because
hoping.
that's the kind of vibe that I got from him talking about how he sees the world in a different way. And
Hmm.
to be frank, I can't discount Morgan Neville, who is one of my favorite documentarians, who made Won't You Be My Neighbor,
Yeah.
which is one of the most heartwarming, emotional documentaries you're ever going to watch about Mr. Rogers. And it also has a crazy cast like Snoop Dogg, and so many other people pop up in this movie. And it has new music from Pharrell Williams, which, like, if Pharrell makes music for a new movie, it's going to be a hit. Just as
Hmm.
Despicable Me
Mm.
with Happy.
True.
So I think it should be fun. The one that I wanted to point out is Saturday Night, which is the film about the leader to Lorne Michaels getting the whole studio set up and ready to go for the first ever Saturday Night Live. And this will be interesting seeing like who they got to play all these famous actors. I know the guy that got Jim Henson in the trailer. I'm like, damn, he looks just like Jim Henson. And there's some pretty big uh Gabriel Bell, who was Sammy Fableman, and the Fablemans is Lorne Michaels in this.
Mm,
So that's interesting. It definitely seems like it has a really stacked cast for sure. Because like just pointing out, let's see. Um Obviously Gabriel LaBelle, Rachel Sennott, who's popped up in so many film things. Dylan O'Brien's Dan Aykroyd. That's crazy. Uh, yeah, J.K. Simmons and Willem Dafoe are both in supporting roles in this. They're oh my god, I love Ella Hunt. He was in that show Dickens about
mm.
um Emily Dickinson with Haley Steinfeld. She played her best friend that was totally not her lover, totally not. Um,
Of course
and
not.
she's playing Gilda Radner, which is actually a lot of fun. Finn Wolfhard's in this. Lamorne Morris. There's a lot of famous performers in this. Oh my God, I didn't even realize Nicholas Braun from Succession was Jim Henson.
Oh. Hmm.
So this is Matthew Reeves is George Carlin. There's so many people in this movie, and I'm just hoping that it turns out to be, like a cool, intense, like just building up to it blowing off and everything. So we'll have to see, but it definitely the trailer really sold me on it. So we will have to see how that turns out. Technically, comes out, air quotes, September 27th in limited release, but
Mm.
October 11th when it actually gets a wide release. And at this rate, I'm not really getting to see a whole lot of press screenings this semester, so it's definitely going to be the regular opening weekend when I finally get to see this. So it should be fun. It'll be an interesting weekend. And then people will see Terrifier 3. Um, and around all the other horror films around, and Joker, which comes out the week before this, which is
Mm-hmm.
wild.
Mm. Yeah,
But
really.
we are here to talk about the Rising of the Sun. I keep saying Rising of the Sun, Rising of the Moon from 1957. This is an 81-minute anthology film about three Irish tales, and this is obviously directed by John Ford. So I don't have a whole lot of notes for this one. Like I said, it's an anthology based off of three tales. It all takes place in Ireland. It's narrated by who I thought was Tyrone Power until he's like, I'm Tyrone Power. I'm like, I've been saying your name wrong the whole entire time. Which it was so interesting because he just starred in one of John Ford's films a couple of years before this, so like him coming in here and doing the narration. But this is we have The Majesty of the Law based on the short story of that title by Frank O'Connor, which was in The Bones of Contention. A Minute's Wait based on the 1914 one-act comedy by Martin J. McHugh, and 1921 based on the play Rising of the Moon by Lady Gregory. So yeah, set the stage here, Haley. What were your general thoughts on the Rising of
So all three of these little, well, yeah, they're none of them are very particularly long, but they're all
the
very different, which I kind of appreciated because I went into this totally blind. I did not know like what the goal was necessarily, like what John Ford was trying to do. But by the
moon?
end of it all, I was like, I get it. Like this man loves not only Ireland, but the Irish. He
Yeah.
loves the Irish. And in in like a very endearing way that is shown in each of these stories.
Mhm.
Um, it's very sincere and like you pick up on it, even when he's clearly making fun of them. Like that the train one in the middle is by far my favorite. I mean,
Mhm.
I was laughing the whole time. Like it was so absurd. But like it's the way you would make fun of someone you love, not someone you're actually trying to make feel bad about themselves. Um, and that's a very big distinction. I think there were some things in the last John Ford movie that we watched that made it very hard for me to like enjoy
Mhm.
the movie because there were some like very degrading interpretations of different types of people. But here, it wasn't that. Like, it felt actually very much about like the pride of the Irish. I think that was the
Mhm.
first one. Like, that's really all they were trying to say is like these people are proud, and like that's okay.
The
So,
few,
those are some of
the
my initial
proud,
thoughts.
the Irish.
The Irish. Yeah.
Which this is a nice change of pace,
Hmm.
certainly from a lot of John Ford's films, which like the westerns, the war films, and then you have something like this, and you can tell that John Ford had such a love for his parents' homeland because they were Irish immigrants. So he was first generation American and experiencing that, and I'm sure listening to a lot of stories from his parents and stuff like that, and here getting a chance to have like these three tales told in such an endearing kind of way. The like the first story is pretty condensed and like it it's definitely like I feel like the shortest one in
Hmm.
terms of like the storytelling. A Minute's Wait was a lot of fun. Patty Rossi, who, which is very interesting, was portrayed by Jimmy Odia. Is that who I'm thinking it is? I want to double check because there is one moment I'm sitting watching this movie that really struck me because one of the actors in the second section of this is talking and everything. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, he sounds insanely familiar. And I'm like trying to figure out where, and it was Jimmy Odia plays King Brian of the Leprechauns in
Mm.
Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which it was definitely the voice because in this he's like completely shaved, no hair or anything, and in that he has like a big full beard and a long hair, locks, and a crown on the whole entire time. He's a charismatic and fun actor, and I feel like he made a lot this Porter Patty, which also have an Irishman got a name of Patty, and I love Irish stuff, to be honest. It was so funny. I didn't even realize this, but my top movies from 2020 to 2021 for each year were Irish.
Oh, really? Well,
Because
Banshees.
2020, well, yeah. So 2020 was was Wolfwalkers, and I absolutely love that. 2021 was Belfast, and like that really struck a chord. And then of course 2022 was Banshees of Inisherin, which that quickly skyrocketed to be one of my favorite movies because I just love that to pieces. But this really does capture like the Irish people and presents them in a way that's, you know, they're having fun with it, but they're also being meaningful and capturing like those good, strong qualities that this film is acknowledging about the Irish people. I think the last section of the film was particularly interesting as well
Hmm.
because like there are some interesting technical aspects to this. There are so many Dutch angles.
Mm.
Like
Hmm.
it's like turn that camera, and there's so many Dutch angles along the way. But like I feel like that one was more of like a heavier kind of story because like the train one, A Minute's Wait, it's charming, it's fun, and it has that kind of vibe. And like this is dealing with like Sean Curran awaits his execution
Yeah.
at Galway prison by the British during the Black and Tan War. It's like this brought a little bit like heavier weight to it and really captured some of the struggles that the Irish people had to go through and stuff like that. And I appreciated the perspective that this film had in terms of, you know, these are three very different stories with different tones and perspectives, but each of them are able to capture what's so special about the Irish people.
Hmm.
And like John Ford had some like dynamic moments in terms of it being a director making this film. This isn't going to be one that's going to last with me a long time afterwards compared to like so like we're recording a little out of order because Haley's going to be very busy soon. Just leaving it at that. And I just rewatched The Searchers
Hmm.
yesterday and that's my favorite John Ford film. I'm like, this is a much heavier film. There's a surprising amount of comic relief in it, but this is like about a family getting their home destroyed and marauded by Native Americans, and the two daughters are stolen, and this
Mm.
whole entire years long journey. This is it's like taking a little break, 81 minutes. It's lean. It tells some tales of Irish folk with some strong performances and everything.
Yeah, and I think that like kind of to your point, this came chronologically at a point in John Ford's career where he could have done basically anything he wanted, and
Yeah.
he chose to do these things. Like this was something he wanted to do, he must have, and he must have, like you said, known these stories and thought, you know, I want to depict these, like
Mhm.
these three in particular, and I'm gonna like make this happen. It's sort of that thing of like there are artists from history where you know that they've like most of their famous paintings have been commissions, but then there's that work
Mhm.
that they did for themselves. And this is very much like it almost had to have been something he did for himself. Because I don't know how popular these would have been, like if these stories were super well known, or if it was his way of almost utilizing his clout to get them out there and kind of put them in front of a broader audience. Because
Yeah.
you did have that like charming, absolutely such a 1950s man, like kind of introducing each story.
Yes.
Um,
Which, like, Tyrone Power was a pretty famous actor. Like, he wasn't the first Zorro, but he was the Zorro in the Mark of Zorro in 1940.
mm,
That was like, is like the iconic Zorro.
I could totally see
And
that.
so he has that kind of dashingness, and
Hmm.
because like that was my only experience with Tyrone Power at that point when I watched Mark Azora like 2 months ago. So like this is a pretty fresh watch for me. And then I watched The Long Gray Line, the John Ford film shortly before this, where he plays an Irish immigrant, and like
Mm.
he really kills it in that performance, and he plays him over 60 years.
Oh
So like
wow.
they were doing a whole bunch of makeup and everything, but like he was so Irish, and I'm like, you were just playing a Spaniard. Wait a minute, which and
Hmm.
he really sold it. Like it's not outside the realm of possibility of like in John Ford filmography having people playing races that they're not, but also like Spaniards are still European. I
Oh, for
guess
sure.
that's close enough. Um,
Geographically, it's like New York and Georgia or whatever. Not even, it's
yeah,
closer than that.
yeah.
So, sure, why
It's
not?
like, yeah, Irishman passing as a Spaniard. That's okay. Um, they do a lot of that kind of stuff with Italian people too. So, like,
Certainly.
well, it's funny because now my most famous Spaniard, Antonio Banderas, they have him playing Greeks a lot now, which is so funny because
Yeah.
he doesn't change his accent.
No, why would
It's it's why would he? If you're getting Antonio Banderas, you better get Antonio
were
Banderas.
we talking together about how in Gladiator, like the
Yes,
accent thing, like people are all up in arms and it's like,
up in
well,
arms
what do
like
you want them to do?
one's Denzel not have an accent. It's just like
They're not speaking Latin?
Do you think all the Romans were British?
Yeah,
Or
right.
Joaquin Phoenix throwing on a fake British accent?
Right.
So, but it's that kind of thing where it's like Jerome Power was like a great choice to come out and like introduce this. He's a well enough name in 1957, which just checking, he died 1 year after this
Oh, wow.
at the age of 44.
Oh,
So like he didn't
wow.
have a
That's so
whole lot
sad.
of he died of a sudden heart attack. So like
That's
he
awful.
didn't do much after this film, but like it was a nice little thing to have him like process it and introduce these stories. this is like that charming Irish folktale kind of experience. And like obviously these are very humanistic stories. There's nothing
Hmm.
fantastical about them and stuff like that. But I feel like it's Ireland on some level that's a fantastical part of it. Because it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful place and there's some interesting perspectives from like gender and lots in life with the Quiet Man. But like that's John Ford's like magnum Irish opus of
Mm.
like this is his like biggest love letter to Ireland, and that shot in this beautiful Technicolor and just captures all the glory of Ireland and stuff like that. But like this film is, you know, it keeps it simple, it keeps it engaging, and it does a really good job of taking each of these stories and like threading them together and creating a cohesive experience that you kind of feel like you understand the little Irish mosaic that John Ford was trying to make with it.
Yeah, and I think the order was good because the
Mhm.
first one, like, I think it's like you said, it's the shortest. It's kind of like the simplest, where what you see is pretty much what you get. They pretty much
Yep.
tell you what it's about, like verbally,
Yep.
which is just like, a man having like bumping up against the law, but he's kind of from a different generation and sort of bemoans the fact that like things are changing and he was defending his honor and he will go to jail defending his honor, like because he stands by what he did, which was bash another dude on the head when he called him a liar. And
The Irish way.
like on some level you're like that's dumb, but on the other hand, like when it plays out, you're like, okay, but like this was clearly very important to this man and everyone around him is playing along. They're all like, yeah, this is like there's a somberness to it. Like there's comedy, but there's also that somberness and it's almost like a mini rebellion. And then the one
Yeah.
minute train like debacle situation is also sort of like a little rebellion where it's like, no, you can't actually make us go on time because that's not how we are. Like we're gonna do our thing in our way. And I don't, that British couple who thought they were going to a wedding. Ireland had other plans.
Mm.
And then the final one, I think, is like a very clear, like, act of rebellion. A much more like, but it sort of like escalates in terms of the scale of just how many people are involved and like
Yeah.
everything that's going on.
Well, and I feel like it in that way you described it in a very interesting way of capturing that essence of the Irish people have rebelled quite a bit.
Hmm.
Obviously, they spent a lot of time being like, screw you, England, and trying to get their independence. And then, unfortunately, like, there's been a lot of turmoil
Hmm.
in Ireland over a long period of time. And this film really captures that kind of essence of like, yeah, we're not going to give up on this fight kind of thing. And
Hmm.
having that kind of dynamic. And it's an interesting experience watching this film and really, taking in just what simply is a love letter for
Hmm.
these people. And they got a really great cast because like all these actors, all these character actors really capture these characters in such an authentic and sincere kind of way. And it's a lot of fun to see on screen. And then, when it needs to be heavier, they're able to deliver those kinds of elements too. It's definitely one of those films that like I put this movie on, had no idea what the hell this movie was about. Um, I try to do that as much as possible when it comes to movies. Like, obviously, there's some kind of expectation you go in with a lot of John Ford films, and this felt different. This felt fresh.
Hmm.
You could definitely tell there was a passion here. I wouldn't be surprised if it came out and said this was one of his favorites too.
I could totally see that. And I think that the people who were involved in it as well probably felt the same way.
Mhm.
You can't know that for sure, but again, it did feel like everybody really owned their roles because there were also definitely, I think in the last one, quite a few very small but significant roles where the person like, kind of because the story sort of like moves between groups of people in a very
Mhm.
short time period, but in each of those segments, the people play the heck out of who they are for 10
Yeah,
minutes.
for sure. Like, there's not a single performance that didn't feel very authentic in
hmm
capturing what it was trying to do. And you really need that for a film like this, that it's such a small, quaint kind of film and just really about the people. If you can't sell the characters and you don't have like a mystery or something like that to build to, it's just not gonna work.
Yeah, and I mean, as someone who didn't like really know where I was in each one, by the
Hmm.
end, I was like, I understood what that was about, and I don't
Hmm.
even know that much about the history, but I get entirely what happened in that last one. Like it was very
Hmm.
clear. So they did a great job of like quickly but effectively and meaningfully portraying like a pretty interesting short little vignette of again like the ultimate act of rebellion right
Yeah.
under the noses of people who any one of those people could have gotten arrested and hung themselves for what they did, even if it was just turning the light switch off.
That light switch off. But but at the end of the day, I think this is a nice little surprise of a film. And this isn't going to be the one that most people are going to, if like you're like, watch a John Ford movie, this isn't going to be it. But it's one of those kinds of films where I feel like if you watch it, you're not going to regret watching it. It just as a nice way of really expressing respect and love for his parents' motherland, and you know bringing it to the United States and showing like what the Irish people are about. So now we got some recommendations for all of you. So Haley, you had a couple that you wanted to bring up. So one of these we saw together, which
hmm
was Alien Romulus. So why do you want to recommend this to people?
So for Alien Romulus, I think the main reason I want to recommend it is because I think Alien has had a bit of an up and down
Mhm.
record. And like after I saw this movie, I ended up talking to a number of different groups of people, just, getting their thoughts. And I ended up convincing a couple people to go see it. It's not like I think it's the best movie that's ever been made, but I think it's a
Yeah.
solid Alien movie, which
Hmm.
if you like Alien, that's good to know.
Yep.
Because you don't know going into it, like, is this going to be a solid one or not? We've had it all. So, I thought it was solid, and I think like I've definitely enjoyed having some conversations just about the Alien franchise with people afterward, like how this fits in, how it feels a bit more like they're trying to kind of rebalance, maybe get back toward like the essence of what they were trying to do in the beginning and like define
Mhm.
it better. Which is cool. Like I loved Alien, I've always loved Alien, so I was like glad that it was good, basically.
Yeah. The things it didn't quite have this, like, what it didn't have compared to the first two Aliens, I feel like is a consistently enjoyable cast. Because I feel like some of them were just like throwaway characters and stuff like that. Obviously, the android winds up being like the best part of the movie.
He
Um,
will be my Halloween costume. I'm going to find a way to make that be my Halloween costume.
my
Rook.
tentative Halloween costume right now is Andre the Giant.
That is
So
a good
there we
one too.
go. As Jess wants to be Macho Man Randy Savage.
Perfect.
She
I
already
love it.
bought her whole entire outfit. So she's committed. But I appreciated about this that I thought that was interesting how they progressed the alien story. This Fede Alvarez directed the hell out of this movie.
Yes.
And there's just so many great things about it from a directing standpoint. It definitely has a lot of homages and connections to all the alien films, including the fourth act twist of Alien Resurrection basically was resurrected in this one, and
Hmm.
wasn't about it. And knowing that was a real dude, even less no, even less about it.
That shook
Um,
me to the core.
yes, for sure. Next up, we had Killers of the Flower Moon. So finally got around to checking this out. So why did you want to recommend this to people?
So I mainly just want to talk about it. Like, I mean, I'm sure that like people out there are aware that this movie exists and that it's, you know, like, but I had been meaning to see it. And like Shane and I discussed earlier in this, like we both like to go into movies blind. I've always been that way. I kind of want to experience the thing for what it is, and not get a bunch of bias beforehand, just so
Yeah.
that I can experience it and hopefully get like an organic reaction. And that can be hard to do, but for this, I think it was kind of like enough of a niche thing that I didn't hear a whole lot about it. I just was told like this is a pretty cool movie. You should check it out. Um, so I was not ready for it to be
Three
three
and
and
a
a
half
half
hours.
hours long. My dad and I were trying wine because like in anticipation of my wedding, which is coming up. And I had like four kinds of wine floating around in my system. We had to split it into two parts. Like because I we were both just like like on the couch after
Like, I
like
can't
2 hours.
handle this.
And it's not that the movie isn't like good, because it is. And the story, like what it's about, is fascinating to me. Like there's a rabbit hole waiting there that I will
Mhm.
go down once I am no longer planning a wedding.
Yep.
Um, but it's such a fascinating dynamic, and I think they really just like drop you straight into it with
Mhm.
like, all of these high-rolling Native American people who are being like catered to by these like country bumpkin Americans, and you're just like, where am I? Like, what is this world? And then, of course, inevitably you expect it to develop the way it does, but it develops in a much more nuanced way than I was expecting. Um, and yeah, some just powerhouse performances. So just a really interesting story. The only thing I didn't like about it, spoiler alert, is that point where they like I stylistically I respected how they like ended up doing the end of it as this like true crime performance thing, but I'm like, friends. You could have saved me like probably an hour if you had just done about 15 more like lines of this. I don't know. I don't know. Like, and I'm not saying I didn't want to like have the story happen, but there was a lot that happened in that movie. And it was almost like
Mhm.
by the end of it, I was reeling. Even after splitting it into two parts, I'm like, there is
Yeah.
so much going on that I think maybe some of it could have been summarized a little bit.
It's it is certainly long. It is certainly 3.5 hours. And I think the biggest complaint that I've heard from people is that it didn't need to be 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is I really feel like they cut out parts because
Mm,
I think, especially towards the whole courtroom stuff, I feel
true.
like there's probably more of that,
Hmm.
especially when you got Brendan Fraser
Yeah.
and John Lithgow
Hmm.
in that section of the film, and it turned out they were not in it very often.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which also people were like saying Brendan Fraser's performance was like the worst thing in the world. I'm like,
They didn't give him a chance to do anything, so I don't see
he,
what he could have done wrong.
if you read the book, you know that the character he played is an obnoxious blowhard.
Well, yeah, it's like the lawyer defending the person who's like so clearly guilty. It's insane.
It's like, you're gonna kill your uncle,
Yeah.
and he's just like, I wouldn't want to mess with Brendan Fraser. He's not a small dude, and like, there's so many. The three main performances, Leo is playing such against type in this,
Hmm.
and it's interesting. Robert De Niro, between this and The Irishman, are his best performances in the past at least 10 years since whenever the hell Silver Linings Playbook came out. There's there's not a whole lot of performances in the 21st century that really stand out for Robert De Niro, and this was one of them. I
Yeah.
think he could have easily won Best Supporting Actor for this. And then Lily Gladstone. And I know a lot of people, so I have a lot of perspective and thoughts on the perspective that they took to tell this story. Because a lot of people are upset that it wasn't a native perspective.
Mm.
I get that. And I feel like hopefully some point a Native American filmmaker could make a movie like this that focuses on the story. But at the moment, the only person that the studio would back to make a movie about the story is Martin Scorsese.
And it's not
How,
like they didn't tell a long, detailed story, because they did.
well, and the main character is Ernest,
Yeah.
which in the book he's barely in it. They barely acknowledge him at all.
Which would actually make more sense because I will say I was expecting toward the end for them to circle back to the sort of tone they had in the beginning, which was like um when she was like rattling off the people who were being killed. I thought
Mhm.
it was gonna roll back to her maybe like that had been her in the past, and then they circle back to it like it had all been a huge flashback, and then she was like did something, wrote a book, or I don't know. The fact that she,
Which she did
didn't.
it and died young
Yeah.
of diabetes. That's the coolest twist of this story is at the very end you find out that they got off and she
Yeah.
didn't live long to appreciate the life that she had again. And you know, this is a harrowing story. And in the true crime book, it spends the first couple of chapters on her. But here's the issue that I think a lot of people are ignoring about the book. There's a whole entire half of this book focusing on the Texas Ranger turned
Mm.
turned FBI guy,
Mm.
White, Jesse Plemons' character. So
Hmm.
the original script was told from his perspective,
So still not her perspective.
and it was supposed to be Leo,
Oh.
but they reworked it because he wanted to play Ernest,
Hmm.
and they changed the whole perspective of the film. But here's the thing: Martin Scorsese was not going to make a film from her perspective
Hmm.
because, like, he's not really in the place to make a film from her perspective. What Martin
Yeah.
Scorsese does, and this film is so Scorsese for doing this, is the real painting the idea of this film is to show the dark underbelly of people.
Hmm.
And it keeps pushing your buttons to see where will your empathy for Leo end? And that's all on purpose,
Yeah.
like building up to that point. And I thought it was a fascinating film. I loved the film. I know I've seen a lot of people were not the biggest fans of it. And I cannot argue with the Native Americans who had a problem with this film and had a problem with the fact that like Martin Scorsese made a film really focusing on this criminal white dude, which
Yeah.
like it's what Scorsese does. He
And
leans into
again,
his
like I
criminal and stuff
will
like that.
think about this.
Yes.
Like I never knew about that, and now I do. And now
Read
I'm
the
like a
book.
little fired up about it, like enough that like there will come a point where I will look into this because it's interesting and sad and like unfair.
Read the book. Really good. And then, I guess quickly, what was the last recommendation we had for you, Haley? Was 1917. So another film you
Yes.
watched with your dad, right?
Yes. Yeah, I was home with my parents. or 2 weeks ago, and my dad and I will watch movies when my mom is watching the Phillies.
There you go.
So we watched Killers of the Flower Moon for 2 nights, and then we watched 1917 kind of on a whim. He had seen
Mm,
it, I had not. Um, I love like really realistic war movies because I think
mm,
we should not be like over glorifying these things at this point. Like there's plenty of that. Um, and I mean the the choice to basically make it feel like the cameraman was a third person, like walking alongside these people the whole time was
mm.
crazy. Like
Yeah.
that made it you're walking with them the whole time. And I've obviously seen most of the war movies out there. I don't think that this was trying to be the ugliest or the most horrifying there ever was. It was just meant to place you in a moment with like a small number of people and really feel like you were there for a brief but important amount of time.
Mm,
Um, and just the way that like you're walking alongside these two people and they make one choice to pull that pilot out of that plane, and 5 minutes later one of the guys is dead on the ground, and it's like that was how things worked. Like
mhm.
you made one bad call, you turned your back for 1 second and your buddy's dead, and like there's
Yep.
nothing to be done, you just have to keep going.
Keep going. You have a mission.
And like that is the simpleness, but also the bravery of that, I think really comes through. And yeah, just like how horrible it is. Like not in an overly melodramatic way with huge amounts of music and like just like the simple, almost mundane horror of it was very
Which,
effective.
especially the early sequence where they're walking through like no man's land and stuff like that, you
Hmm.
can smell it.
Yeah.
Like that's how detailed this is. You can smell it. The way that
Hmm.
Deakins captures everything with this tricking you into thinking this is just one sustained shot the whole entire film is incredible for a film like this. Crazy,
Absolutely. I was like, how
crazy
big
film.
is this set?
And the cast, like George McKay, does a fine job, but you have the likes of, I think, Andrew Scott, Mark Strong, Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Farrell, not Colin Firth,
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
English one, not Irish one,
I was like,
Colin
where's
Firth.
Col? I missed.
Um, and there's such a strong cast here to carry this too, but this really is a technical achievement.
Yes.
And it is gorgeous. That burning city is one of the most
Mm,
haunting and beautiful looking things on screen. It's just this whole entire thing sends you on this crazy mission that it just captures all the disgusting seediness of what war really is.
hmm.
Because, yeah, it is. So, wrapping up with my couple of recommendations, new film, Speak No Evil. I have yet to see the original. I do have to go back and watch that. But James McAvoy was incredible in this. Like every moment he's on screen, he stills the screen. I do feel like the third act gets a little like it's a bit of a different quality compared to the rest of the film. But it's still one of those kinds of films where this could give you hope that if they make American remakes of things, they might actually be good.
What was the
So
original? When did that come out?
like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So like this is
Oh,
like a
dang.
relative, like a new one. It's apparently on AMC Plus. It's about a Danish family going
Oh.
to visit rich people.
Mm,
Um, and in this one, it's an American family living in London who winds up going out into the deep forest of the UK and regretting it. Um, Next up from my watch list is Village of the Damned, the original, the 1960 version. Haley and I talked about the 1995, I think it is, John Carpenter version, which had its moments.
it
This
was
is,
a movie.
yes, this is lean, like 70 something minutes lean, really captures things well. it presents an interesting and compelling story. George Sanders, great actor, really anchoring the film with his deep voice that gave Shere Khan um all that intimidation from the original Jungle Book. And one film that I rewatched that I feel I had a movie marathon over the weekend. I could have easily said Office Space or Mean Girls or What We Do in the Shadows, but I'm saying Hundreds of Beavers. This is the most fun, engaging, and must-see movie of this year. This I got a press screening link back in January for this. This is a crazy live action, black and white, practical, mostly practical effect Looney Tunes cartoon put to life about an apple seeder who turns into a furrer, or furrier, whatever you call somebody who like does
Traps
track
animals
animals.
did for the fur.
Yeah. So, but all the animals in this movie are not little animals; they're human beings in animal costumes.
Oh God.
It is wild. This movie is wild. It's only an hour and 50 minutes, but like it has so much going for it. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's entertaining. It's funny, and just an absolutely delight to watch for
Where would
sure.
someone find this?
So, not that I'm condoning letting people sign into your user accounts for any kind of streaming service, but I do have Fandor on my Amazon account.
Hmm. Okay. Duly noted.
Duly noted. This is such a fun, wild movie from start to finish, and it's just unabashedly itself, for sure. And that is a wrap here on another episode of Welcome to the Wasteland. Haley, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that I got to give John Ford a redemption that he does not need from me, but that I still am now willing to provide.
And Haley will be back on Welcome to the Wasteland in February, when we are doing Moonrise Kingdom,
I was going to
the
say the
Wes
month of
Anderson.
love to talk about one of my favorite love stories of
Little
all time.
romances, little romances. But no, Haley will be back when we get to Wes Anderson. So her John Ford duty is over.
I'm proud to serve.
Mine is not quite over. I still have a bit to go. But, and so do all of you going along on this journey with me. So thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wing Slam reviewer.